One of the biggest mistakes that I found that I made as a sales rep was I didn't find great ways to connect with my prospect. I'm not talking about being their best friend, but there's something about you being able to connect with another human being prior to having a business conversation or in that business conversation. On this episode today, we're going to give you some ideas. Well, my guest, Grant, is going to give you some ideas of what he and his team does. And that pre-email example, bro, is straight fire. You're going to love it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I am so excited to be here with you today. On this conversation today that I'm having with Grant Lira, one of the things that Grant's going to talk about was how he and his team is making really good connection with their prospect. As I mentioned in the teaser, it's not about how we can become best friends with our prospects, but it's about how can I make sure that I'm not just talking to a talking head or talking to another title, but I'm talking to a human being. And as he shares what they're doing, you're going to find how impactful this can be for you and for your organization. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll be sure to notify you every time we have a new piece of content. If you have been listening to the podcast and you say this stuff is dope, I want you to tell somebody else about it. Tag me on it on LinkedIn. Just go ahead and do a post with one of our episodes at Donald C. Kelly. I'd appreciate that. Now, speaking about LinkedIn, you know we are big fans of that. And if you're trying to build pipeline this year and you're trying to get 3 to 5x your pipeline with quality opportunities and you want to get 3 deals at least per week from LinkedIn or appointments, bro, got you. We got you back. Go ahead and hit me up on LinkedIn or go to linkedin.com. The salesevangelist.com/LinkedIn. Again, the salesevangelist.com/LinkedIn. Listen, as we dive in now, get a chance to connect with Grant. Get a chance to hear his background and see why I feel this content can really help you when it comes to connecting with your prospects. Grant, welcome to the show, my man.
I am very excited to be here. Super intrigued by the title. I think it's awesome. You know, the Sales Evangelist. Like that's just it's one of those titles or shows you hear and you're like, why didn't I think of that name? That's such a good name.
Some people, I had enough people ask me about that, mention that idea to me, and they always ask about the name. And I got like initially when I first launched, I would get like folks, like religious folks coming through.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's got to be a church, something with this. I'm like, actually, I do go to church, but it has nothing to do with church. I only heard the name of the evangelist like in a church setting, though, like the Christian gospel, right? But it's a vivid picture, right? You think of this evangelist, and Guy Kawasaki was Apple's chief evangelist back in the 90s. And I first heard that term transferred into business, and I was like, that's dope. When I was in college, it's like, that makes sense. Imagine like you're evangelizing for Apple. And I was like, that's cool. And I kept that part, I just thought about it. And then I got into a tech company. I became the tech evangelist. I put that on my business card because it's just better than account executive. And then I did, I got into, we started doing podcasting. My buddy was like, you're always talking about sales. You should be like a sales evangelist. And I was like, bro, that makes total sense. So that's how it came about. So
I like that.
We're evangelizing today, Grant, about sales. Now, speaking about evangelizing, you guys are doing some pretty dope stuff, right? Why don't you take a second and tell us a little bit more about you and what you guys are doing with your company?
Yeah, definitely. So basically my brother and myself started the company when we were both in college together. It's called The Empathy Firm. And what it's essentially kind of came to today is we help people guest on podcasts where their ideal client profiles would be listeners. And then we kind of looked at the space and we're like, transparently, there are some people doing a really good job at like podcast, guest booking for their clients. We felt that there were also some pretty big gaps in the space. So like one of the gaps we saw is like, well, these people are spending 30, 40 minutes on a podcast, but they're not repurposing it. Like that seems like a huge waste. So the other part of what we do, is we take that podcast, we repurpose it for both short form blog content and press and PR, articles and stuff like that. So basically we only ask like 3 hours a month of people. And then they get not just the podcast, but then all of this content that can fill their pipeline, support their sales funnel, and just kind of help with like that brand awareness and getting in front of the right people.
It's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea, because I think the name of the game right now is attention. You
Oh
got to be
yeah.
able to get attention from your prospects and your clients, and I think it's brilliant on that side. Um, I want to go into this convo because I think this naturally leads right into it. What the empathy firm is doing is this notion now of how can I break through as a sales professional. This episode is all around that unscripted path, right? Um, Ditching scripts, focusing on connections, and and creatively connecting with people. So let's talk about the environment. What are you seeing from a sales perspective right now when it comes towards the challenges that sellers are facing, when it comes to catching
Yeah.
people or getting hold of prospects?
I think it's probably to nobody's surprise, but over the last like 5 years or so, there has been a ton of either new online agencies popping up, like new companies being born, kind of new people entering this space. And I think that's awesome. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But what I
Hmm.
think prospects are kind of getting sick of is like that cookie cutter, you hop on the call. Hey, I have to ask you these questions to make sure you're a good fit and like that kind of stuff, because that's like kind of the training wheels, right? And a lot of us start there. I know I started there, but I think it's
Yep.
really like connecting with that person right off the bat, being very clear, like, hey, I don't know if this is going to help you. I need to kind of get a lay of the land. Can we have a conversation about like what it is you're trying to do, so I can see if like either myself or somebody in my network can maybe benefit you more? Having that connection. And then honestly, like, this is probably not going to be a surprise to a lot of your listeners, but like just the whole script of like, oh, I have to overcome this objections, that stuff. Like, you should have a pretty good presentation, if you want to call it that. But what you should really be focusing on is like, can I help these people? What does their current system look like? Can we work with it? Do we actually think we could get results? And then if yes, yeah, you should have a pretty good like explanation of what you do and how it helps them. But it's less of that like robotic going through the script, looking at your stuff. They ask me a question, go back here. Like, it's really, I tend to advocate more for the bullet points, like, hey, these are the things we got to touch on, here's some kind of important stuff. But I really think moving away from like taking the training wheels off and really just not going into it as a sales
Yeah.
conversation, but a conversation with another professional who you want to see if you guys can help each other out.
And I love what you shared there, Grant. Like, are you a football fan?
I do watch football, yeah. I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm a Packers fan. Yikes.
Oh, I know, man. But check this out though. Like, you think about football, and you think about this idea, like if you have two teams running the same exact plays, that's going to
Yeah.
become a pretty darn boring game because everyone's gonna be hitting that. And I think that's where we are too, based on the description where you just shared. Like, I find that sellers are doing the same exact thing from two different teams. Like, my sales reps are doing this, their sales reps are doing this, and it's like we're hitting against. But we got to
Yeah.
stand out. We got to be different in order, because I don't want a buyer to come on a call and be like, "Listen, I just did this dog and pony show with the other two companies. I don't want to go through this again." But what else can I do? Because I do need that intel, and I love what you shared, that it's a training wheel. And the way I look at training wheels, they're not permanent. They guide me on the right path and make sure I don't fall over, but I shouldn't rely on them forever unless it defeats the purpose, right? Can't do a catwalk with training wheels on. But how do we make that transition now? And what is that transition to, for that you guys are seeing and that you're doing with your team?
It's I'm sure like you know about, hey, if you're getting these objections after the call or after you give your pitch, you should probably say something about that before so the question doesn't come up. It's in my eyes
Mm-hmm.
basically the exact same thing in terms of your warm up or like the pre-call sequence, right? It's all about like making sure, and I'm just gonna put my phone on mute here because I forgot to do that before the show. There we go, no more rings. But essentially, in our sales pitches, we front load our objection handlers, right? If people always ask you like, "Ooh, that seems like a lot of money," we build up more value, stuff like that. The same equation that we all know for like how to not get objections is basically the same thing for like warming people up and having a conversation. And what I mean by that is get them everything they need except for, your like high level presentation. And obviously sometimes the price, we give price up front. Like I don't have an issue with that, but get them everything they need before the call. So when they show up to the call, they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I know enough about you guys. I've seen your case studies. I know I've consumed some of your content. Like where do we go from here? Like, tell me about, what you guys do, or how do you think we could work together? And then it's like, oh, cool. You've already seen me talk. You've already heard me. You've already looked at all our case studies. You've already done all this stuff. Now it's just you and me on this call here. Let's figure out if this is a fit.
I love that. The preparation beforehand, I think was Marcus Sheridan calls it like giving them homework before the call. It's that pre-call work, right?
Yeah,
Helping them to get to that standpoint. You mentioned the idea of like connection. How can I, if I'm a sales leader, how can I, let's go back as a sales rep, how can I look for other ways to connect creatively with people from the jump?
Yeah. So this is a big one. I mean, you will kind of win the conversation, if you want to call it that, or, just the relationship in the beginning, because it breaks you out of the mold. It is harder to do. So just practice it, right? Make sure you can do it appropriately. But if you can get somebody like laughing right off the bat, tell a joke or make an observation, something like that, people laugh at their friends. They laugh with their friends. If you can make them laugh, like, okay, their guard's down. You're not a sales rep anymore. You're just a guy on a call. And like, oh, that's pretty funny. Yeah, Grant, like, let's, dive in. Or it just kind of pattern interrupt. And like, they're not expecting that. With that said, it needs to be done tactfully, right? Because obviously you can get a cheap laugh, but that's the other thing that obviously helps is just letting them know, like, very straightforward up front. Hey, here's why I'm here. I'm pretty sure you're here because, for my instance, podcast guesting, you think might be able to help you achieve something that you're looking to do. Tell me about what it is. And then I'll let you know if either, myself or somebody else I know might actually be able to help you out further. Yeah, Grant, for sure. Here's what we're trying to do. And literally just dig into that, like learn about what they're doing. And, you can worry about the budget or kind of what they have set aside after that, but you really got to get on the same page with people and show them that you like, okay, because you told me this, I do believe we can help you because of the, people we've helped before. If you don't mind, can I ask a few other questions, kind of get a general lay of the land before we move on here? And then it's just off to the races. Or like, oh yeah, for sure. Do your thing. And it feels less of that, like, what's your budget for this year? Have you done this before? Tell me about your experience. It's like, that's not very fun for anyone.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from this part, it feels more natural, the natural conversation, right? If somebody is having a natural conversation with me, I'm going to be like, dude, I'm going to be more than willing to answer those questions, because I've been taught, and all of us have been taught, whenever you hear a question, you should, when you ask a question, you should reply with an answer. And when you are giving when you are making it so natural for me to talk to you and it's just flowing, it makes it very easy for me to just continue down that path in the dialogue with you as a sales professional. I want to keep going around this idea of, I made a mistake before, Grant, where when I was selling, I would focus mostly on getting the appointment, or I'm focusing on closing the deal. And I played flag football, right? And I was pretty fast. And maybe I may not have the best hands in the world. All right, more like a running back. Give me the short stuff. But one of the reasons, though, Grant, that I didn't have like such good hands was because I was so worried about getting hit that I didn't actually. I was running before I had the ball, and being fast, it sucks too. So I'm thinking about getting down the field and dodging you, but I'm missing the idea of catching the ball. And what I mean with this is, if you think about it from a sales rep, we are so oftentimes worried about you saying not interested, or it's not working out, or that you're not ready to buy, that I'm so focused on the end goal that I'm not focusing on the now goal of connecting with you. Because if I do connect with you, catch the ball, I can make it a first down or make it a touchdown, but I do have more yards, more than likely, as opposed to not catching the ball and run. Am I making sense with this, Grant?
You're definitely making sense. And like for me personally, I mean, we've all been told, watch game tape, to keep with the football analogy, right? Watch your sales calls, review your sales calls. And that absolutely helps. Like, it helps so much. But I think when I was, really young in this game, like something I kept realizing was I felt like the calls, something just wasn't like connecting, right? It just didn't feel right or natural. And I would watch these calls back and I'd listen to myself and I'd sound like a robot, or I'd sound like I'm trying to be corporate or something like that. And so one of the things I did was, one of my best friends in the world is named Matt. And I always think about, well, when I talk to my best friend, how do I talk to him? Like, what does that sound like? What does that look like? Because it sure doesn't look like this. So then I started going into these calls and just imagining, like, hey, imagine you're talking to Matt, right? Imagine it's just a conversation between, and oh my gosh, the difference in not just how I sounded and how like I was like, oh yeah, this is much better, but the connection and then the actual response was a world difference. And I think that, like, if you imagine you're speaking to your best friend on one of these calls, no matter what the situation is, you're going to be way more human, less robotic, and people are going to be like, oh, this is a real person, not just, some robot with a head asking me questions off of a sheet.
Yeah, and I love what you shared there. It's a great idea. Think about it as if you're talking to your friend. That definitely takes the roboticness out of it. It also takes the idea of the script out of it. It's more of those talking points. And the other part to that too, when it comes to like talking to your friend, I feel like when you start doing that and when you start connecting on that human level, you don't see them as a title anymore. You don't see them. What I mean is, so I might say my ICP may be CMOs, reaching out to the chief marketing officers at an organization. There is Mandy, Barbara, David, Lex, Rex. All of these are human beings. And all these human beings more than likely fall into a demographic. They may be in a millennial demographic like I do, have like young kids, or maybe they're in a, maybe they're a little bit older but whatnot. But they probably have to go home and make dinner tonight or figure dinner out somehow, right? They probably have stress of worrying about like, getting tasks completed. They probably have issues with family members with health. Like, they're humans when it's all said and done. And I think when you talk to Matt, you're seeing Matt in that vein, and rather as opposed to director of sales or director of marketing. So for me, I like to try to figure out a way to get past the title. Thoughts on that? Like, am I making sense?
That's
there?
A perfect example. 100%. Yeah. And I mean, me personally, like, I never got caught up like thinking about, oh, this is a CEO or this is an executive or this is a boss or like something like that. It was always just me like thinking that I had to sound a certain way or act a certain way on these calls. And if you really break that down, like, the reason why I think that is because that's the stereotype. These people have to talk a certain way. These people have to do this thing. And so you just fall into the sea of everybody else who not only thinks that same way because maybe they're a little bit fresh to the game, but they're, trying to do the right thing. They just don't know necessarily how to kind of break that pattern and really cause like an actual connection. So yeah, your analogy is spot on there.
Are there any other creative ways? Appreciate that, man. Any other creative ways that you've seen sellers, folks you've worked with, when it comes to getting connection early on?
Yeah. So I really do believe that it all comes down to what you do before the call. So like what we'll do is, as soon as we see like a appointment booked on my calendar, we'll go ahead and send out, just a pre-call email. Hey, looking forward to call this time, this date. Is that on your calendar? Like, do you have the link, right? That kind of stuff. But then also saying, hey, here's an article about us. Check us out here. Here's some of our case studies. If you have any questions before the call, here's my personal cell phone. Feel free to reach out. I'll usually text people as well. And I do text them from my personal cell phone. So I have an iPhone, it turns blue on their phone. So like, oh, this is an automation. Like, this is an actual person. That's kind of nice. And that is all, yeah, it's all physically me. Like, it's really me doing it. But then the real, I think, magic, for lack of a better words, is what we started doing with our 24 hours before the call email. And basically I recorded a video. It's like 3 minutes, but it talks about like the 3 types of person that we found that we have helped best in the past, with an example of, each one of those people. Send them that video. Hey, here's a short video to watch for a call. This will help a ton. I bold and underlined a ton in the email. Click here to watch. It's a video. They get to see me. They get to see how I talk with my hands and, how I do my stuff, and they hear my voice. And so that way, when they get to the call, a lot of people are like, hey, man, I really appreciate the video. Just to let you know, I feel like I'm the second type of person. And yeah, I've been looking over you guys, and I'm very, excited to kind of talk today and see what we can do together. And it's funny because then, you go into this different frame of the call where you're just working with them to kind of figure out exactly what you guys need to do and if it makes sense.
I absolutely love that concept. Any sales rep on the call, listen on the podcast today can do that. Like that doesn't require anything that's like, overly complicated. Um, but it does help me as the buyer to feel like I'm prepared. Like most people like reality TV because it's like I'm getting a glimpse behind like what these Real Housewives are doing or what the Dynasty guys are doing. It's like I'm getting a trip or a allowance behind the curtain, and it's really fascinating. It's cool in that vein. But the other side to that too, though, is that um, for a prospect, it feels as if I'm prepared and I feel I know where the conversation is going way beforehand, and I'm not just coming on this call just looking for your trick. Like, where are you gonna kind of
Yeah.
jab me with the price? It's like, bro, this is what we're doing, and just makes such a great way. I love this idea, man. Any other thoughts you have around making genuine connection creatively before we wrap up here?
Definitely. I mean, I with that video, right? It's something where like I think a lot of people, if you're thinking about implementing that, you might have the headache of like, well,
Mm-hmm.
have to write this script out and I have to practice it a bunch of times and I have to do this stuff and I have to look really good on camera. Like, think about it like this. If you were to do that and you look perfect and you didn't hesitate, stutter, say one time in that video, and then you hop on the call and that's not who you really are because you had to work at that and you had to practice that. Then you hop on the call and it's like some cognitive dissonance going on. People are like, wait, this dude isn't the same guy I saw in the video. Literally, hop on the video. You can take a few takes, but it should just be like, hey, here's who I am. This is who we help. Like, don't be afraid to like authentically be yourself and actually, make those small mistakes or small like, stutters, whatever the case is. Like that's super important for showing that you're a real person, and it's going to be congruent with who they see on the call tomorrow. So don't get like in your head about, oh, it has to be perfect. It's going to take so much time. Block out an hour, knock it out. And yeah, it really isn't that hard.
I love it, man. Well, this is great. If folks want to get in touch with you, Grant, to get a chance to learn about you or your agency, see if there's a way they can benefit from this, because I know some sales leaders can definitely benefit from the service and sellers as well. What's the best way for them to go about doing so?
Definitely. So you can reach out to me via email. And as a thank you for listening, I actually have a gift for you. After this podcast, if you feel like anything, we said has been helpful, go ahead, shoot me an email at Grant, so Grant at empathyfirm.com. Again, Grant at empathyfirm.com. For the subject line, put the Sales Evangelist as the subject line so I know that you guys qualify for this special gift. And as a thank you for listening and a thank you for reaching out, I'll go ahead and we'll actually publish you in 3 online publications, 100% on us. So that's just a thank you to you. That's something that you can also leverage in your pipeline or in your sales process to just build that social proof, send some stuff out before the call, follow up in a way that doesn't feel salesy. That's probably the biggest one. But yeah, shoot me an email, Grant at Empathy Firm, with the subject line, the Sales Evangelist, and we'll get you rocking and rolling with those 3 free publications.
Done. I'm putting that in that show notes right now, or
Amazing.
Make sure my team does it. But Grant, we appreciate you coming on the show. We appreciate you enjoying this, helping us to recognize how we can be creatively connecting with our prospect beforehand. Much love, man, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you, brother. This was a blast, and love what you got going on here. So thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, suck it now. That was Grant, and I want you to go ahead and connect with him. Find out some more about his organization, about him, by going to linkedin.com. You can find all the details there. You can find his link down below. You can connect with him on LinkedIn, but you can find all the information down in the show notes. Let me get this right. Listen, I want you to thrive and I want you to succeed. I want you to be able to make more connections with your prospects. I want you to be able to have better conversations. I want you to have better discoveries, calls. I want you to be able to build better pipe and close more deals. Our LinkedIn prospecting course is going to be a great tool to help you in that process too. If you apply those things, you're going to get 3 to 5 opportunities per week. In addition, now you have the things that Grant just shared with you. Come on, you're unstoppable. You're going to be able to have some really good connection. I really am going to implement that idea of that email, and I love the video. I've tested that before, and it's worked. So we're going to reinstate that concept. I want you to succeed more than anything. I want you to raise your level of thinking. I want you to go out and do big things. Make some money in the process. See you in the next one.